morning, everybody. Welcome to the Grundleverse. My name is Grundle, and today we're here to talk about Tomb Raider. For years, video game fans have been waiting for some kind of renaissance like the comic book movies have seen in the Marvel universe. And unfortunately, Tomb Raider is not the movie that we've been waiting for. From characters to plot to even the action set pieces, which should be where the movie can hit a home run, it manages to fall underneath the low bar that the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movie set 15 years ago. Unfortunately, the failings aren't even that it's just over-the-top terrible. It's boring. Let's start with the characters and work our way up from there. You gotta start with Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft, who looks right. You know, you give him credit for that. The look is perfect. But, you know, how hard is a blue tank top to pull off? Especially because you're going from the Lara Croft from the newer games, which is even less stylized than the originals. You know, the short shorts are gone. It's just basically a blue tank top. She doesn't even get the dual Berettas, obviously, until the end, because this is based off the more recent Tomb Raider, where she's using the climbing axe a lot, which she barely has in the movie. She gets a bow and arrow once, she gets the climbing axe once, but other than that, it's just basically Alicia Vikander running around in a blue tank top, so you know that she's Lara Croft. But beyond her look, there's not really anything redeemable about the character herself. I understand that this is the prequel to the Tomb Raider stuff, so she's not, you know, badass Lara Croft yet, but she doesn't fight well, she isn't smart. Like, she makes bad decisions from point A all the way to the end of the movie. There's almost no decisions that she makes that I would say, oh, she's outsmarting her opponents, or she really thought through this situation. She just consistently makes situations worse. Like, she ultimately feels like she's tumbling from set piece to set piece, where she survives purely on the basis of being the main character. So bullets don't hit her, you know, you can fall off a cliff and something will catch you. She doesn't do anything to save herself 90% of the time, short of, like, pulling herself up something that she just got caught on. Like, that's not what I want to see Lara Croft doing. I don't want to see her accidentally surviving things. I understand that as a prequel, this is supposed to be her, like, learning all this stuff, but it never feels like she learns how to do anything. It doesn't feel like she gets smarter or improves as she goes. You know, sure, she'll pick up a bow and arrow halfway through and shoot somebody with it, but she doesn't think to pick up the gun that the guy drops. So, dumb. You know, there's one dumb decision after another in that, and that's not even talking about, like, as dumb as she gets once she gets to the tomb. I'll go into that once we get to the story stuff, but let's take a look at the rest of the cast before we go too deep into the weeds of how iffy the story itself is. Since this is taking place on a mostly deserted island, there's not a lot of side characters, and the few that there are really are nothing that saves the movie. You get Daniel Wu as Lu Ren, who is probably the most important side character, or it seems like he's gonna be. He's kind of like her partner going into the thing, but very quickly into it, they're separated, and he gets caught up in this kind of worker revolt that's going on, but the worker revolt doesn't really accomplish much, and he's not there with her when you get to the climax in the tomb at the end, so he kind of gets shuffled off to the side, and as much as you want to like his character, you don't really understand by the end why the hell he's there. Like, why should I care about this guy? Why don't I see more of him? Why wasn't he with her? It feels like a wasted character, and, you know, Daniel Wu does fine, but again, nothing to do. The character doesn't have any big moments, so you really can't care about how well the actor does. Outside of him, there's, you know, her father, played by Dominic West. I'm not a big fan of Dominic West. Again, didn't really do much. The character didn't do much, so not much to say there. Walton Goggins as Vogel, the bad guy, and that's not a spoiler. As soon as you see him, you know he's a bad guy, and Goggins pretty much always plays bad guys, so really wasn't a shock. He was actually one of my favorite characters, not even so much because he was a great villain, as by the end he's the only one I actually cared about. As dumb as that sounds, the bad guy was the only guy by the end that I cared about, and I wanted to see him get out of things alive, so I'll give Goggins some credit for that. I thought his character was one of the few shining parts of the movie, and I don't think he was supposed to be. So I don't know how much credit I can give the movie for that. But that's basically the entire cast. Outside of that, it's just some kind of minor side characters you maybe see once, and a bunch of, Chinese workers who are just slave labor and therefore don't really get any lines. So ultimately, the cast is fairly weak. But maybe the story can save it. It does not. No, the story does not save it at all. In fact, it's not just bland, it's dumb. Like, it's the one part of the movie that manages to not just be boring. But speedrun recap. Lara's father disappeared 7 years ago. She figures out that he was secretly a Tomb Raider. She finds out where he might have gone, heads off to try to find him, finds the island, encounters the bad guys, and wraps it all up by reenacting the final few scenes from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And that's basically the whole movie. And it's on its own. The child's journey to save the lost parent is a pretty standard plotline and isn't really bad, but they don't do anything else with it. There's nothing interesting in here, and a few dumb choices Lara makes early on and kind of throughout makes it really difficult to root for her as a character, so just enjoying this on the pure basis of being a character's journey doesn't really work either. And that brings us to our first major issue with the movie, being that the Lara Croft character herself is essentially a cross between Batman and Indiana Jones, and as such runs the risk that Batman runs, that if presented wrong, she just comes across as a spoiled rich kid who is using her money to do whatever she feels like doing, without thinking anything through or considering the consequences of any of her actions, or whether or not she's actually prepared to do the things that she's planning on doing. A major story point at the beginning is that she refuses to take her inheritance because it would be admitting that her father is actually dead, which I can accept as a character trait until she decides to go off to run a rescue mission for him, at which point you'd say, well, having that money would probably be pretty useful. She goes off alone to Hong Kong, not speaking a word of Chinese, and stumbles across a drunk boat captain to take her out there, where she could have just taken her inheritance and chartered a crew and a boat and a helicopter and plenty of other things so she could mount a real rescue campaign. But she doesn't do any of that. It just winds up coming across as dumb and unprepared. And that's pretty much her character throughout the whole movie. The movie kind of pretends to take some time early on to make you feel like you're seeing, okay, well, she's a badass. They give her a BMX chase through London, and they give her a chase through Hong Kong with some pickpockets. But both of those sequences don't really make her seem that impressive. She's not pulling off a lot of acrobatic feats, not doing parkour, she's not doing anything that would make you say, oh, she's trained, she's going to go off and be Tomb Raider. She just seems like an unseasoned kid, which I get for the hero's journey, but as far as like, well, she's running off to, rescue her father from this uncharted island, it just makes her come across as dumb and unprepared. She has the resources and she just refuses to use them. So, like, how can I get behind a character who is that dumb? This winds up getting compounded further on in the movie, and I'm going to throw up a little spoiler warning here, although honestly I don't think there's any twists in this movie you won't see a mile off, and the ones that, even if you didn't see them coming, they're not that impressive, so little spoiler warning. But once she gets to the island, and she finds her father. That's the big spoiler. She finds her father. It turns out that some bad guys have been trying to hunt down this tomb because it has a super weapon in it, essentially, and he's been throwing him off the scent for years, and they'll never find it as long as they don't get my research, and you burned it all like I told you to in that video will that I gave you. Oh wait, you didn't burn it, you brought it with you, and now they have it, and they know exactly where the tomb is. So once again, the bad things that are happening in the movie are brought about by her being stupid. She basically hands over the stuff that the bad guys need. And it's a situation we've seen in a lot of other movies, so it's not like this movie's unique in doing this. It's just every time a movie does this, I say, man, if that main character had just stayed home, all of the bad things that are happening would never happen. And this movie is just that, end to end. Everything bad that happens, Lara's presence and her actions ultimately are the cause of them. And that really hurts the movie throughout, because you want to root for her, but at the same time you can't, because she's dumb and she's fairly incompetent. And you really don't want her to be. You want her to maybe not be a badass, but have some signs that she will at some point be that. But she mostly just comes across as an entitled kid who's doing whatever she feels like doing at the moment. You know, oh, there's some bad guys. I've shot a bow and arrow before. Let me pick up this bow and arrow and attack these bad guys who have assault rifles. You know, she gets away with it because she's the main character and she's an action hero, so she can shoot an arrow at a guy with an AR and be fine. But, you know, as an audience, you're sitting there saying, well, that's just dumb. Just do something smart. Do something that makes me, really want to cheer for you. But she just stumbles through one self-created problem after another. But all that aside, I was willing to give the movie a chance at the end. Once they got to the tomb, an hour and 10 minutes in, they finally open up the door to a tomb, and here they are in a tomb, in the Tomb Raider movie. And the tomb just sucks. Like, I know it sounds silly to be this upset about the tomb, but man, it's a Tomb Raider movie. The traps, there are 3 traps, I think. One of them is just a pit that they just unfold a ladder thing over it, and now we're across. There is one puzzle trap that one is actually impressive. There's a dropping floor trap, and that's the one set piece I'll give this movie that was pretty decent. But it's followed by the final trap, the 1,000 or 100 handmaids of the entombed person that you have to get past this army of dead handmaids. It's nothing. Nothing happens. It's not even a trap. It's just a room with some sarcophaguses. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this is the climax. It's okay, they're getting to the final trap, and then nothing happens. And it was just indicative of the movie. It was, you're waiting for something big to happen, and then nothing happens. And I'm not gonna blow the climax. You know, I know I said spoiler warnings, but even that, you see the final, like, supernatural thing coming a mile away, and it winds up not really being that big of a payoff. But ultimately, that's what this whole movie is. No payoff. It's just a not very interesting character bouncing from one not very interesting set piece to another for an hour and 40 minutes. The only interesting thing that really happens in the movie happens in the last 5 minutes. So ultimately, the only thing I can say for this movie is maybe it sets up a decent sequel. But that's not okay. It's not okay for a movie to have 5 minutes of interesting in it because they want to set up some kind of a world. I get that the Marvel Universe has made everybody think that they should do something like that, but can we please just put out a good movie? Tomb Raider is not a good movie. It's boring. It's stuff you've seen a million times before, and even if you haven't, it's not that exciting. If what you want is a Tomb Raider movie, then watch the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movies. They weren't good, but they were bad in a more interesting way than this one is. This one is just boring. So, ultimately, no, I do not recommend Tomb Raider. Give this one a skip. Don't even bother with it when it's on DVD. If you're not a Tomb Raider fan, this will not do anything for you. And if you are a Tomb Raider fan, you'll probably just be insulted by it. So that about wraps it up for Tomb Raider. Thank you all for listening. Once again, my name is Grundle. Good night, everybody.